In the last video, I made some Christmas decorations for inside the house, and this time I'm going to make one for outside on my porch. One that depicts the winter season and takes me back to my childhood a bit. A kid's winter sled. My goal is to make this a very simple build that anyone can do, and even though I'm starting on the table saw and will be using my miter saw, I'll tell you how you can make one of these with just a handsaw. I'm ripping down some wider stock here into pieces about 2 1/8 inches wide, just because that's as wide as I can get them from the offcuts I have. From there, I take them to the miter saw to cut them down to the lengths I need, and I first cut 2 pieces 40 inches long and cut them off square. But I'm working from my head again after looking at pictures with no written drawing, which isn't always all that dependable. So I remembered I wanted to cut these at an angle. So I reset and cut them at 50 degrees on the saw, nipping the corners off. And that's just the angle I thought would look right, but you can cut at whatever angle you like. And these are parallel cuts, not opposing cuts, so both edges are the same length. No wasted wood here really, just a few extra cuts, but the overall length remains the same. Then I cut 2 pieces at 12 1/2 inches, and these do need to be at 90 degrees. So I got those right on the first try. Then I cut some pieces for the seat, but end up changing that a bit. So I ended up with 1 piece at 26 inches long, 2 at 24, and 2 at 22 for the seat. I'll end up doing some more cuts on those as well, and you'll see that in a minute. This is some of the same stock that I've used on other projects with a rough sawn side and a smooth side, and I didn't bother to run these through the planer. I'm just sanding them down a little extra on the rough side, but I'm not too concerned with it anyway. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is a porch decoration and not something that will get close scrutiny. Anyway, I sand all the pieces ahead of time so it won't need any sanding later when I put it together. While I was sanding the seat pieces though, I got to thinking that they'd look better if they weren't cut square, so I decided to do a little more at the miter saw. I set to 10 degrees, and for the center one, I marked the center of the board, and I'm cutting off the corner each way from the center so it angles both ways. The other seat slats I just line up with one corner and make one cut so it angles in one direction. And these cuts are opposing cuts, so you have a long edge and a short edge. And here's what you end up with. Then I go back to sanding and finish up with those. But then I put the steering board on there and thought I should do something with that too, so I look up a picture of the old flexible flyers, and some of them had curved shapes, but the later ones had simple angle cuts on the front, so I decided to cut it like those. But to do that cut, I had to set up with a 90-degree board to be an additional fence, so to speak, to hold the piece up against. With that in place, I just set the saw to 5 degrees again and was ready to cut. Oops, forgot the dust collection. Now I can cut. This setup doesn't get all the dust by any means, but it gets a lot of it. So there's what it looks like. Then I'm ready for a dry fit and a look to see how the proportions are. Needs a little adjustment. Okay, that looks good. I mark the spots I want the cross pieces to be, then grab a square and take the marks all the way across because I'm going to locate them in the approximate center. I flip the rails over just to keep it straight in my head because I want to locate the cross pieces so when I put the seat slats on, the slats are even with the tops of the rails. So I'm using a couple slats as spacers to set the cross pieces on, so the top of the sled is facing down right now. I line up the one rail with the edge of the bench and then use a framing square to line up and make sure the rails are even with each other. Then I can start putting it together. I add a little glue to the cross pieces and put those in place. Then decide I might as well just put glue on the other ends as well and do both sides at the same time. After a quick check to make sure the cross pieces are square, I put down a seat slat just to locate the nailer and nail it. Then throw a clamp on to hold the other side in place. Recheck square. All good. Nail away. And this is just a decoration, so these brads are fine to hold it together, I think. Then I get to some finishing. I'm going to paint the main frame of this thing red, and I'm just using some spray paint for that. And after a few sprays, I decide I better open the door and some windows and turn the fan on to get rid of the fumes and overspray. Normally I do spray painting outside, but it's way too cold and windy for that on this day. So indoors it is. When this coat dries a while, I'll flip it and give it some on the other side. While it's drying though, I get to putting some clear coat on the seat slats and steering board. I'm using the oil-based clear polyurethane, which tends to yellow the wood some, but that's exactly what I want here. I think that was the color on the original sleds, and I want that blonde color on the wood. I'll give it one coat, and then I'll probably spray another coat on the whole sled once it's put together. That's the color I want right there. So with that coat on and drying, I decided to make a little add-on decoration to go along with the sled. Time for drawing. And it's a pretty simple one at that. I modify it a bit and then trace it out on a board twice with the transfer paper, and I'm ready to cut it on the bandsaw. But I couldn't make sawdust that day as I had paint and clear coat drying. So the next day I took it to the bandsaw. I filmed me cutting the first one out with no issues. I started on the second one and got most of it cut out, but I did have a little issue with this one. If you look close, when I cut around the thumb of this mitten, I end up cutting a little piece off, and the blade carries it down through the throat plate. Right there. And I heard it scraping. I shut off the saw and cleared it by backing up the blade, but it was still lurking in there. And I think it vibrated back in and jammed and broke the blade. So I had to take the time to do a blade change. There's always something. Anyway, I didn't film all of that blade changing, but once I got the new one on there, I finished the second mitten. And there it is. Left-handed or right-handed. With all the sled parts mostly dry, it takes longer in this cold weather, I start the assembly. I figured the best way would be to do it upside down again, and that way I could brad nail those seat slats on from the back, and there wouldn't be any nails showing on the front. I'm not bothering with glue here because wood glue wouldn't work anyway on these painted and clear-coated surfaces. The most this thing is going to do is lean up against a wall, so I think the brad nails will be fine. If it does loosen up, I can always put a screw or two in each slat from the back as well, but I don't think I'll need to. I fuss with it a bit to get the slats even and the spaces in between them close enough by eye, and then shoot one brad into each slat to hold them in place long enough that I can flip it over and give it a good look, and give you a look. It looks good, so I add 2 more brads in each slat at each crossboard. Then the steering board goes on. I give that a look, check for square, make sure it's even and centered on the sled. Needs a little adjustment to get that right. Recheck square, nail it. And there it is. Kind of looks like a kid's sled. Time for a finishing touch. Needs a pull rope. Sleds have a pull rope. I measure about 1.25 inches in from each end and mark to drill a 3/8 inch hole to put the rope through. I use a scrap piece underneath to try and prevent blowout on the bottom side. Whoops, wasn't holding it tight enough, but it made it through. Same on the other end, but I hold the block a little tighter this time and it works fine. Got a little blowout, but not too bad. Luckily, I had some rope laying around because I never throw anything away, and that saved me a trip to town. Just put it through, tie a knot on the backside, and looks like a real sled. Now to finish up the mittens. I power sanded to soften most of the sharp edges, but I had a little hand sanding to get into the finger thumb crotch area. So I did that with some 80 grit sheet sandpaper and knocked those out in no time. Then I needed a way to hang them, so I figured some string would do the trick. So I drilled a small hole in each one. Now to get the string through there. That was a little fiddly. Guess I should have drilled that hole a little bigger. After fighting with it for several minutes, I finally managed to get it through and tied that one off. Then I got the other one, figuring I'd have to fight with that one too, and it went right in on the first try. Every once in a while, something goes right. I ended up shortening the string a bit, and there it is. So I think it turned out well. I'm happy with it. A real simple project that anybody can do, beginner or seasoned woodworker alike. You can do this with basic tools. You saw me rip down these pieces on the table saw, but you wouldn't need to do that. You can go to your local box store and get furring strips, and they come in 1x2s or 1x3s, and of course you can get 1x4 lumber as well, but I think the 2-inch wide and the 3-inch wide would be perfectly fine for this build. Use the 1x3s for the rails and the 1x2s for the rest of it, or you could use a 1x3 for this. You could use a 1x3 for the center one and then 1x2s for the other two boards. I think the original sleds had a wider board in the center. Or you could just adjust the width to whatever boards you want to use. You can change the dimensions on this thing a little bit to suit whatever you have. All these cuts here, these 50-degree cuts on the rails, these cuts here that I believe were 10 degrees, You can make those with a speed square, mark them out with a speed square, cut them with a circular saw or a hand saw. They don't have to mate up to anything like these cuts here. They're not mating to anything, so they don't have to be that accurate. As far as making these cuts, what I would do is take one of the 1x3 furring strips as an 8-footer and cut these angles while you still have the full length board. You can clamp the board down to stabilize it. Mark the angle with your speed square, mark it out, lay it all out, then make those cuts with your circular saw, then cut it to length. You could also do those cuts with a handsaw. And all of these cuts you could do with a handsaw, pretty easy. I used a brad nailer to put it together. You could use screws just as easy. Screw in from the back if you don't want to see fasteners on the seat. You can screw in from the side for the cross pieces, or and being a painted project, you could sink the screws in, fill them or plug them, and then paint over it. You could also put this together with hand-hammered finish nails. The only other thing you really need is a drill to drill the holes for the rope. There you go. The side project, the mittens, you'd probably need a jigsaw, or you saw me use a bandsaw. You could cut them with a jigsaw or even with a hand coping saw. That'll about do it for this one, I guess. Got some more Christmas stuff coming up in the next one. So, see ya.